all right. So we back at it again, Damien. Our last discussion, man, that was pretty cool, bro. So welcome back, man.
Thank you.
All right. So
Happy to be
before we
back.
start, yeah, man, it was. Yeah, I'm glad we're here, man. We've been talking back and forth like the last week since our last discussion. But real quick before we start, just tell everybody where they can find you at, like where you promote most of your work at.
So really the easiest way is my website, which is damienmariathope.com. So that's the easiest. But I'm also on X, and I'm on Blue Sky and on Facebook. And I have an academia account also. But the
Right on,
easiest,
right
all my
on.
stuff is on my website.
Right on, right on. So I met you on X. We've actually had some great conversations back and forth.
Yeah.
It's rare to kind of have that on any of the social media platforms, especially when somebody's trying to prove that they're right and so on and so forth and all this. But
Yeah, and I
you
would say
wanted to,
that to me, I've talked to a lot of people, and rarely is anyone even close to my level of understanding myth and stuff the way you do. I mean, you're so I find that to be interesting also, and nice to have someone to talk to, because most people are fucking clueless, and if I say different things, they're just so lost that it doesn't even. It's hard to have like a good conversation, even an argument, because they don't know.
right, because they just be spitting out stuff. They just say whatever comes to their mind. Yeah, that I know that's how I feel. Like I said it last time. I feel like people they get too much emotionally involved with their work, and what I mean by emotionally involved is that they don't want to sit there and open their mind to, hey, possibly you might not have all the information. So somebody out there might have what you need, and you might have to separate that idea from or those emotions from those ideas. And a lot of people can't do that, bro. Like it's amazing, and it's funny because in reality, nobody knows what the facts are. It's just really off our own beliefs, really, and that goes with emotions. But there's a certain level of certain type of evidence that people require to believe in things, and that's nothing wrong with that. That's why it's a gray area, right? Because everybody's evidence can be different, right? And I know before we started, you wanted to talk about mounds. So what was it that you wanted to get into about mounds? Because that's perfect about how interpretations and all that stuff comes into play.
Right. So, in general, most of the things that archaeologists or academics, historians, mythologists say, I relatively agree in a general sense. Almost everything. I'm the farthest away, in a sense, from the conspiracy theorists and and alternative history people. But one thing that I absolutely am not even close to the academics is I feel that all the stuff in the world, like the mounds, like shell mounds, dolmens, kurgans, earth mounds, pyramids, are semi-related in a way that
Yeah.
I feel academics act like they're completely blind to. I don't think it has to do with space aliens or advanced cultures. Well, I'm just making a comment. So, just clarifying, even though I don't believe that, I do believe there's mythology connections. And I also find it, to me, like a lot of times, one of the things that academics should say when it comes to myths is that we don't know. That's a
Yeah.
healthy thing, to say. What they'll say
Yeah.
is the reason people build pyramids. I've heard several times. It irritates me because it's fucking a nonsense answer. The reason people build pyramids is because that's the easy way to stack rocks. Well, that has nothing to do with why they did it. Why did they want to do it? You're saying that it's easy to stack rocks. It's like not even an answer to me, especially to me, like what I sent you. We literally know that the Egyptians say the reason they stacked rocks in a mountain is because they believed it represented a recreation of the mound of creation. So a mythology story.
Yeah.
So to act like that somehow you're an academic and you don't know the fact that every mythology story, there's like a couple different ones. I send you a link to Egyptian creation myths. There's like four, main stories. Every one of them has a mound. They have a little bit different of how that stuff works with the mound, but they all have the
Mhm.
pyramid, the primordial mound. And then the primordial mound didn't even start in pyramids. In fact, the mastabas, the things that were, like I said, platform graves, sort of, before you get to pyramids, they already were putting little like recreated mounds of creation inside them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's why they
there
were
was a
stacked on
point.
top of each other.
Well, eventually they stack on top of each other to make
Yeah,
a step pyramid. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
before the step pyramid, the mound was already involved in their burial things. So
Mhm.
then later they stack them, and then they call them the mound, a step pyramid the mound. Then they call it a bim bim, which is whatever is on top of the pyramid, the top
Mhm.
capstone or whatever, which is like a pyramid shape, is the bim bim, which is the mound of creation.
Mhm.
And so to me, there's never a point where the Egyptians aren't loudly saying the reason we do all this is because of mythology. So that's why I find it just God stacking to me that any academic would go, well, the reason is just because they like to stack rocks like that. I just go, what the fuck? Do you not even read? So, in a sense, like I said, that's my one big disagreement. And then also, when it comes to like the Mesopotamian, the Eridu creation is also about a mound or a mountain that the city and then thus also their ziggurats are built to represent. And so it's very similar to the mound of creation of the Egyptians. And to me, that right there's another reason. So there's two societies that people say are semi-separate, and they're both doing it almost the same reason why they're building these pyramid-like structures. Then you go to the Americas, and even like the Hopewell culture and the Mississippian culture, those cultures say that or show in a way that they believe that the mound or mountain or Axis Mundi, the center of the world, is this mound. And so they're like also doing these for the similar reason that you have for the Egyptians and for the Mesopotamians. And then also you have older myths that don't relate to pyramids, but relate to, like, I think, why you get to the Mount of Creation, which is the earth diver myths, which that some people think are 24,000 years old. And so it's in a sense, this journey of myths that goes like the earth diver is that animals go down and pick up mud from the bottom of the ocean and then bring it up and build land. There's also myths where a deity does that, picks up sand or something from the ocean and makes the
Yeah,
first
some of
land.
the Mesopotamian stories has that.
Right. So, and so does, which I sent you, Slavic mythology, which is paganism. Slavic mythology says a deity brought up sand and made the first mound. And then you have Finland, which is not in a sense connected to Slavic. And Finland, because it's also a totally different DNA and people. But they have, if you go to creation myths, I think it's description, there's a little picture of a mound with water moat and a big light like the Axis Mundi shooting out of it for Finland, showing that they also believe in a mound of creation and why there's a mound. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's way more than that I could go into. But to me is where I see it's a mythology reason. The different people made the pyramids themselves. No one taught them, but the desire to build the pyramids to me was mythology. Just like the desire to build, different cathedrals for Catholics or something, or Hindus to build temples. And then including the Hindu belief and the Egyptian. So in the Egyptian mythology, one of the mounds of creation, on the middle of it is an egg, or gets laid an egg, and then it cracks and that turns into a god or whatever, and then creation happens. But it happens on top of a mound. And then also in Hinduism, people have seen before the lingam. Well, the original lingam was an egg. So a lot of this stuff everyone thinks is so different and separate. Mythologically, it isn't. And that's pretty much what I've been trying to do once I realized all this stuff, is that, wow, you can see where the DNA moves culture-wise, and then all of a sudden these shared myths.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something, like I said, that I know the academics think, oh, no, it's not connected. It is connected. It's not aliens. It's not an advanced Graham Hancock, culture did everything, taught, white people taught everything, is some racist. The indigenous people made it, It's
Wait,
just,
wait, wait. So what? I got a question. So why do people think that Graham Hancock is racist? Like
oh, I
what
didn't
do
say
you?
Graham Hancock has to be racist. I said
No,
that
no, no, no.
Graham Hancock or people that are racist, because
Yeah,
Graham
yeah. That's what.
Hancock has a well, let me explain. So Graham Hancock has a version that he read and admits he read from Ignatius Donnelly. Ignatius Donnelly has to do with the, in a sense, the mythology about Atlantis. And so Ignatius Donnelly was a racist, rabid racist. And
Mhm.
so Graham Hancock admits to taking some of his ideas. Graham Hancock doesn't inherently call his thing, Atlantis, but a lot of times they'll go, oh, it has to do with, 12,000 years ago or 11,000 years ago, and he's relating it to the time of Plato saying it's 9,000 years in the past. So he's trying to relate, in a sense, Atlantis without doing a lot of, mentioning of Atlantis. He's Atlantis without the word, in a sense. He just calls it
No,
ancient culture. I was saying that there's
yeah.
other people that, like you talked about last time, that inherently say, yeah, Atlantis is where white people come from, and they taught all the brown people, in a sense, or taught the whole world. And that's inherently wrong and racist. So, like I've said to someone before, if you're more accurate, QDNA, which is brown people, because in a sense, like South America is like 90 something 8% in a sense QDNA, and they're darker skin. That
Mhm.
those people, it would be more accurate to say those people taught everybody, or most, not everybody, but a lot of stuff, including Sumerians. The Sumerians DNA is in a sense found in the Marsh Arabs, and the Marsh Arabs have QDNA at a level that's not normal for the rest of the area. And I feel that that also could relate to their language being outside or different than all the other area. But my point is, I'm saying is, if you're going to say anything, you would say people that are almost like South Americans taught everybody. That would be more accurate than this belief that white people did it, like Europe and stuff.
No, I was just asking that because everybody says that he does that, and I know that. You know, look, I've read books from Albert Pike. I mean, if you know who Albert Pike is, I mean that
No.
dude. So he's supposedly he's a Mason, and he wrote these books. He wrote a couple of books, and one of the most popular book that he has is Dogma, and it's just basically what every level of a Mason is supposed to do, and so on and so forth, and stuff like that. And it's I'll be going over. It's kind of hard to explain because it's like an instruction manual, pretty much, and it
Okay.
just tells you, from 1 to I think like 32, what level is required of you at those levels and stuff like that. And then before you can go to the next level, you have to have those other ones completed or whatnot. But and then I got books from Godfrey Higgins. Well, Albert Pike also has he's also to do with the slavery and stuff like that. He's so many different theories about how is his involvement basically. But it's he's a very, I mean, there's a lot of information in his books. And then you got like Godfrey Higgins, who's also another Mason, who talks about where black people come from or where people originated from and so on. And he wrote books in like 1833. He's like one of my favorite authors and historians. And uh some even though somebody might say something that you disagree with, they still might have a piece of information that might be accurate, right? Just like not everything somebody says is wrong. Like if you let them talk enough, they'll add some kind of truth to their story eventually, but majority of it could be wrong. But you can still learn from somebody regardless. That's why I don't really understand, because see, I ask a lot of people that I ask them, I say, hey, why do you think people call him Graham Hancock racist? Because when Atlantis comes up, that's one of the biggest discussions that's everybody starts with. And I'm just like, I don't understand it, because you can read from anybody and still get a piece of information from them. It's just how it is.
The fact that you can read from someone wouldn't make it true or untrue that it's racist. I
Yeah.
mean, you can read from a racist, and so I'm just saying that doesn't make it not racist. I mean,
No, what
people
I'm
say a
saying
lot of
is
things.
that
I'm just making a comment that I understand you can learn from someone. I learn from people that are
yeah.
foolish, and what it tells me
Yeah.
to do is to not be foolish and try to learn. So, I
No,
mean,
that's what I'm saying. That's why I agree with you. Like when you mentioned those two words, I was like, oh man, I have to ask you this question too, because it's
right,
important because you know you said the word Sumerians, but technically if we're going to be technical, Plato considered Atlantis a civilization, and they were an advanced civilization. So technically they would be considered the first civilization, right? Because the Sumerians came around 3200 BC, give or take. But what's interesting that you said about that is that, because you talked about the mounds, and you can find mounds all the way around in Americas. You can find mounds everywhere in the world, but in Samaria they have a lot of mounds. And what's interesting is here, I bring this up real quick because this is what strikes me with curiosity. I always talk about the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, and the reason why is because for the fact that it's like it's an easy source anybody can go to use when it comes up to the Sumerian text. Now, the Sumerian civilization started around 3200 BC, but they didn't really start talking about the Anuna, the Anunnaki, in their cuneiform until somewhere around 1800 BCE. That's according to the sources that I have.
right,
So with that being said, you know, you have to understand that, well, not you in particular, but the people that may be watching and listening that don't know this, is that um, the Sumerian writing system started because they was trading. It was the Akkadians that started writing about the gods and stuff like that, and then the Sumerians adapted that within their cuneiform writing system and their locations with their culture. So the Akkadians and Sumerians didn't they had a basic understanding of who their gods were, but there were different, truths to it, I guess you could say, from which side. And what's interesting is because you mentioned a lot about the mounds, and when you look right here, the debate between copper and silver, this is the cuneiform identifier
right,
C536. It says, "Heal and deaths, Maharo, leveling all the mounds, strong copper directs the way a dragon." Now, these dots here is stuff that's broken in between the writing, so it's words and stuff like that missing. Then they mention a dragon, because they mention a dragon in the Sumerian text. Then it goes
right,
into the broken up text again, and then it says strong copper, and then it says broken up text again, the fields, turbulent waters, and then broken text, the use, and then strong copper again, then in broken text, the mighty waters, Enlil, and then broken text, silver, strong copper, and so on. And then there's like 8 lines missing, 10 fragmentary lines. But what's interesting is in here is that they're leveling all the mounds, and if you read it just for what it seems like they had some kind of strong copper, and they definitely had silver, right? So this, if you wanted to, like, this is how I try to tell people, if you wanted to, with translations, you can actually translate this as those mounds could have been even pyramids. They just called them mounds, and then later on they were called pyramids by different people, right? Because they're
right. Well,
saying
yeah,
that
the name pyramid is not Egyptian; it's actually Greek. So,
yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm saying, is that we get ideas of them having these types of tools in their writing systems going back to at least the Sumerians. You know what I mean? And this
oh
is
yeah.
why they had, like, well, let me ask you, do you really need do you think you need a writing system to build anything?
Do you need a writing system? No. Just like you don't need a writing system to have religion. Religion was way preceded any writing system. In fact, even we do know that tracing back, the myths of the Proto-Indo-Europeans out of Ukraine, 6,000 years or so ago, that and they didn't have writing systems until, basically the Greeks would be the first Proto-Indo-Europe, because Proto-Indo-European, it becomes Indo-European. Indo-European is Greek, and it's also all the French and Spanish and German and Nordic and Italic and Italian. So, but the Italians got it from the Greeks, and the Greeks got it probably from the Minoans, and the Minoans probably got it from two sources, maybe in a sense, from the Phoenicians they traded with, and also from the Egyptians that also traded with them more directly. So, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
So let me ask you, why do you think everybody needs to know this stuff? Like, why is this important to study?
Well, especially about the mounds and all these reasons, is people rightly look at all this stuff and say it seems like there's some kind of a connection. And I'm telling you, yes, academics are wrong saying there is no connection, but the connection is mythological, and thus that's the reason. It's not that one culture taught everybody, and it's not aliens, which are just showing it like a lot of other reasons. People go, if they look similar, it has to be, related. And I'm saying, yeah, these are related, but the relation is not what these other people are saying. The relation, which I can show, even with all kinds of sources, that the relation is, mythological, not, these other fanciful explanations. And certainly also not like some academics saying there's no relation at all. I mean, that also to me is wrong. There is a relation.
When I hear that too, it kind of makes me wonder how there isn't no relation, because as long as people has been integrating with other individuals, they took from each other's culture and created a new culture. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? So
absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly.
But they still honor the past. There are still people who use Egyptian like music today, even though that hasn't been playing, authentically by the people of that time for like almost 3,000 years. Same for Mesopotamia. There's a guy out there that plays Mesopotamian music. He goes off of what the cuneiform says and what the notes say. And they do their little translations, and he plays music. So people still play this type of music and do this stuff till this day. So the culture still lives within. And then people still, religion is part of that too. I feel like I'm oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what I find odd about academics is they'll agree that stone tools spread everywhere. They'll agree with this, but somehow culture doesn't. They'll agree that DNA spreads everywhere, but somehow culture didn't. They'll agree, that building stuff, like say they know, a lot of them will admit that Mesopotamia influenced the first pyramids. So they'll agree that, but somehow they don't think the myths went with it. I mean, I just find.
I never thought of that like that. No, that's a good point. That is actually a good point. That's actually a really good argument if you think about that. If you could believe that the tools moved from one place to another, and you have facts for that, you have the symbology for that, the facts for that, because you can find symbology around. You can find the signs, the symbols. You can find all that stuff, but for some reason you can't believe that. What now? Say it one more time.
What I was saying, that there's a belief that all the artifacts and even sometimes technology moves, but not ideas. I find that to be ridiculous. I mean,
ideas and the mythologies, right?
Yeah, the mythologies, right? Religion ideas. That somehow religion ideas didn't move. What? How could you, with critical thinking as an academic, how can you say, I can agree the technologies, the DNA, and even all kinds of other cultural things or whatever, but not ideas? Seriously?
Yeah, not ideas. That is actually a good point, because I mean, you have to be there long enough to learn how to use that tool. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, you just can't. I mean, you can drop a tool off at somewhere and have somebody figure it out, but I mean, you want something out of it too. So, they're going to make sure they get in their quote unquote money's worth, I guess you could say. So,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
and
no, that's
also
that's a good point.
from
That's a
the
good
and also to me, from the point that we know religions like, say, the Silk Road, right? We know from the Silk Road that Buddhism went all the way to Egypt. We know that it interacted with all these different
Yeah,
things,
Jesus traveled. It even says that.
right? I'm just
That's why
saying.
when people
So
that's why when people tell me that when people tell me and say that Jesus is our only teacher, he should be your only teacher. I said, well, Jesus went to others to get taught too. And
I'm
they'll be
just saying
like,
that what's weird is that they'll know that that happened in recorded history that we know. To
yeah,
think that it didn't happen before, that somehow that was magically a different time. I just the people haven't changed. they 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 are this similar thing. Just like I've been influenced by other people that I've talked to. Cultural appropriation, yeah, but in a sense, we're all sharing cultures that came out of Africa because language goes back. They can trace it sometime around probably 100 to 130,000 years ago, before people really left Africa. And there's a mythology like the Milky Way that goes probably back to Africa. And since I see it this way, since we all, in a sense, come from a DNA, the shared family sort of DNA, we all think of ourselves now as different. But in a sense, we really are one culture that relates back to Africa. 70,000 years ago, all of us had a very similar culture from Africa. So the fact that it then diversified, and again and again and again, that's true. And we all made unique cultures from that shared cultural heritage. So, yeah, I mean, I see cultural appropriation more for me personally. When people say that, if I acknowledge it as a thing, is that people take cultural ideas and try to make them theirs and aren't, it's like people like say they like rap music or something, but they hate blacks, or they hate R&B but they love the music. I mean, I feel like that's to me more of a cultural or Asians that you like, Asian food, but you hate Asians. I mean, I feel like that's more personally. I'm just saying people do that all the time.
no,
I'm just thinking,
it makes sense. Like, you can't really truly hate something if you like a little bit of it. I mean, you just
well, yeah, the bigotry to me is stupid. It doesn't require you to make sense. I don't think that it is a sense. That's the easiest
yeah,
way for empires to integrate culture. Right. But sometimes it was the opposite. Sometimes cultures like and you said the Sumerians, and the Babylonians, they literally are different DNAs and they're different in a sense cultures, but a lot of the Babylonian take ideas, not just their own, but from the Sumerians. So it's not that all, because I'm just making a comment. Some people think like every time a stronger power takes over, they somehow push all their ideas and accept nothing new.
yeah,
That's
that's
not,
what
that's
King
not,
James did.
yeah, but even Catholics, right? Catholics, right? It's Ireland that made everybody in the Catholic world, do stuff privately. Before the Irish, Catholicism, you had to go in front of the church, in front of everybody when the doors were closed, and stand out and tell your sins to everybody. It's later that they end up, because the Irish start doing it like in little rooms with one person that doesn't tell anyone. So I'm just making a comment. So
Yo, can you imagine that day, bro? You don't need no television, bro. Just go straight to the Ireland church, bro, and just sit in there and just be like, yo,
right,
people come in here and say some stupid shit right now.
but but
Yo,
but also like the
seriously,
Mycenaeans, right? The
think about
Mycenaean
that.
Greeks, they take over in a sense the Minoans, but a lot of their mythology comes from Minoan sort of blended sources, and then the same with you know the the Romans. The Romans take stuff from Greece, but they also took stuff from the Etruscans that they conquered. So I'm just making a comment to what he said, that it's always the rulers in a sense pushing their religion. No, sometimes rulers steal the stuff from other people, like you said, cultural appropriation, and make it part of their religion or synchronize it in a sense into their religion. So, I mean, I'm just saying it's certainly, mythology is not like a cut and dry thing.
So what do you think about the Sumerians and the Akkadians? Because you know the Akkadians took over this or made it as one basically. So do you think they
Right. Well,
adapted
I
some of the
think that
Sumerians?
they synchronized some of the stuff, with their own religion. I think a lot of it they also took because they were not a powerful people and saw the Sumerians probably as powerful. So even though they took them over to get, it reminds me like in China where they have the divine right of kings. So the first empire, in a sense, the divine right of kings, once it was overthrown, you want credibility. So you don't say, I'm this new thing that took over. You say, oh, no, God gave us the divine right of kings. So that's why we're ruling now. He took it away from the other people.
Well, why couldn't they had the same religion beforehand? Like that's the only thing I'm thinking about. Like, why couldn't it just have
Well,
developed?
Arcadians are Semitic. So the one they're, which I feel, to me, that the ideas come from, because eDNA 5,000 years ago like leaves Egypt, eDNA does, and becomes in a sense what not all of the Akkadians, but certainly some of them. And I think that the empire idea is not from Mesopotamia, but from Egypt. In other words, Egypt had city states that matched.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying
city states from? Yeah, I'll clarify. So city states, I think, start with kingship. Kingship to me starts probably in the steppe or in the Cossack Mountains or in the Balkans, one of those areas, and then it goes down into the Middle East. Then they get proto-kings. And then those proto-king ideas then go to Egypt. So then Egypt gets proto-kings. Not that people are taken over, but ideas. And so then Egypt is, in a sense, has sort of like city-states, not exactly, but something closer to that than empire. But then Egypt unifies, right, and becomes empire, which did not happen in Mesopotamia until later, until, in a sense, the Akkadians come and make empire. They're the first, in a sense, empire. So to me, what happened is the ideas leave Egypt, probably with eDNA, go into their Akkadians. So they're semi-Egyptian, in a Sumerian, like you said. They're not saying they're totally not, because even the Egyptians aren't totally not related at all with the Sumerians in trade and ideas. And so then when the Akkadians take over, they already do have some ideas that are similar in religion, but they also have ideas that are totally new. Especially, like I said, to me, it looks like Egypt started the first empire and then gives it to the Akkadians, who then go and take over because they now have that empire mentality. It's not just good enough just to have a city state. I want to have the whole state of all the cities, in a sense. And so that also, I think, just like in Egypt, they take a bunch of because different cities had different beliefs, and Egypt's empire puts them together like in a group. And I feel that's about 5,000 years ago is when, in a sense, religion gets military. Because before that, everyone obviously could believe what they wanted because different cities were doing that. But it's after this fact that they start having a corpus of ideas where some powerful person is picking or is allowing which parts are going to be the, in a sense, religion for that area. And that's the same thing that, like you said, that happens, when the Akkadians show up. They do pick ideas that are pre-existing there, but I think they also brought some of their own. And some of those, their own, were, I feel, somewhat influenced from Egypt also, not just influenced through Sumerian. So they had dual, but they also, I believe, because 5,000 years ago, dogs from Germany go into the Balkans, then go into Turkey, and probably went down to their area also. So you have ideas coming from multiple sources. And so it's yeah. So did they have similar beliefs? Yes. They were not like, in other words, is wrong for me, at least, to think that they were totally different. They're not like 100% different, but it's like people in the United States, right? I'm from California. My lived experience and mythology or ethnocentrism, whatever, is going to be different than someone from Georgia, even if they're also just like me. Even if everything was the same, they're bald headed, they're white, I mean, everything the same, still going to be different. In fact, I know that when I first started truck driving, I've been to every single state in the United States and 4 provinces of Canada as a big rig driver. And that helped me know that, wow, even though we think we're the same, there's a lot of difference. Because
Yeah,
I was,
culturally,
culture. I was super hated because I had earrings, to go to other areas where it wasn't good enough just to be white. I wasn't the right kind of white, and so I didn't fit in. And that really,
yeah. That's
it
funny
was
you
like,
put it
whoa,
that way.
wow. In fact, in Alabama, when I was 22 years old, I'm now 54. I was 22 years old in Alabama as a truck driver, and I went to a restaurant to eat. Just to give a real quick story, do you understand? Even though I'm white, right? Of course, I was clueless. I'm from the Los Angeles. I'm used to being around all kinds of ethnic and stuff. And my family, my dad married a Chinese woman, so I had a stepbrother that's Chinese, and 2 stepbrothers. And then my other uncle had married Hispanic, and my sister is married, an African American who's also got some Native American. My whole family is like, the melting pot. So for me, experiencing racism and blatant was not something I was used to. And so I go in Alabama, and I sit down at
Yeah.
a restaurant, right? Alabama. But this is when I was 22. So this is like, 30, 2 years ago in Alabama. And I sit down at a restaurant, and there's some, African-American couples dressed nice. And there's one white, not dressed nice, but a white, man and woman. And he's not eating, right? And I come in, and he's looking at me. And I look at him like, yeah, what the fuck? What are you staring at me for? And then some more people come in that are African American. He pushes his food away, and he stands up, and he looks at me, and he looks at the door. And I'm looking at him like, I'm sat down already. I'm like, what the fuck? And then he goes to the door and then looks at me again, like stares at me. I'm like, what the fuck? Well, I now realize he felt I needed to leave because there's too many African Americans in here for us to eat food. And so I didn't leave because I'm like, whatever, fucking weirdo. And then I go outside, and he had called a bunch of white friends. And they had sat out there in trucks near my truck because I had parked across the street. They're all sitting near my truck. And I'm like, what the fuck? And some of the African Americans that were inside had come out with me, and they said, hey, man, we'll protect you against them. Yeah. I thought, what the fuck? And they go, yeah, I think that they didn't want you to stay in there with us. And so they want to beat you up or whatever, it fucking blew my mind. Like, what the fuck? So my first experience with racism was African Americans protecting me from white racists. I mean, in a real way. I mean, so I'm saying the culture. So just because we're Americans doesn't mean the culture is not different. So I really
tell that from people from up north and people from the south, and just like you said, from California. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Totally. So,
but that's what I'm saying is that even if we're like that in 2025, with our supposedly technology, our intelligence, our knowledge, our supposedly high IQs that's running around and people brag about and stuff like that, why do we still have the mentality that we have as far as that still played like that today? Like, people are still, things like that still happen today. And if it's like that happened today, just imagine how it was back then in those times. You know what I mean?
I mean, exactly. Yes.
So
bigotry is nothing new. I mean,
yeah. So that's what I'm
But
saying is that, but see, but even then, that those people probably believed in the same God or has the same idea of the same God, but they interpret what God and Jesus uh, wants for His people, right? So that just shows that you can have two people with the same religion, but have a
yeah,
lot of hatred within each other in the same religion. And how does that even play out? Like, how does that even really play out in the reality of taking anything serious when people don't even do the foundational basics of understanding what the text say? Because I think I asked you this last time. Do you think the Old Testament and the New Testament should be sold separately? Like they shouldn't be something that you go off. Like you can't, if you're a Christian, you can't quote from the Old Testament. You're not allowed to. And if you if you follow the Old Testament, then you can't quote anything from the New Testament. Those are two separate books talking about two separate different things.
well, I do agree that there, in a sense, the Old Testament certainly doesn't have a lot of things the New Testament has. The Old Testament doesn't really have heaven and hell in the same way that the New Testament tries to portray it. Sin isn't the same. Like Satan, Lucifer, the snake is not the same. I mean, it definitely is. It evolves. But then, like I
One of my
said,
favorite books
same.
that I one of my favorite books that I always keep next to me is this one right here, the New Jerusalem Bible, the study edition. I think this was like published in like 1925 or something like that. I don't know. It's a pretty old ass book, but whenever I people start throwing out scriptures, I go to this book to read it and see what it actually says, and then I go follow certain other paths to see if to verify the information. The reason why is because this is a very thick ass study guide, and I like it a lot because it tells you exactly what the meanings are, and you can sometimes find the words, and it's a pile of a lot of information basically, and when people start quoting the scripture, I wonder which version of the Bible are they quoting from? Like, because different. I mean, there's different Bibles. You got 66 books, or you got 88 books, or you got everything in between, and sometimes you got more than that, depending on what you consider a Bible, right? So, what Bible are you using? And that's my biggest question, because I always get tripped up when people start throwing out scriptures and saying this and that. And you can't just read a paragraph and just be like, this is what it said. What was the context? So your story was basically context on what drove you into your journey through this. Like, you used everything. You seen that there was a whole different group of different people out there culturally living out different ways, and you was curious about why they lived that way and did things. And even that, having that information, for me, at least for me personally, it helps me apply that same information to see how people were back then. Right?
Yeah.
Like how did the bigotry start? Where did it start at? Like, where did these issues start out? Because like a lot of people worship Gilgamesh, but if they actually read who Gilgamesh was, man, I'm just like, yo, you don't want to worship that dude, especially if you're a female. Like, that's not somebody who's married at that. You don't want to worship that dude. Like, I know people who say that, he was a great guy, he was a great king, he was this. I'm just like, do you know the story about that dude? Like,
To me,
there's a
whenever people
reason
talk
why.
about
There's a
kings,
reason why it's a good thing that dude didn't get to live forever. You know what I mean? Like, there's a good reason why, a
right?
very, very good reason why.
To me, whenever people talk about kings or rulers or empires, I always think about ancient billionaires.
Yeah,
Because
that's how I think of them too.
if you wouldn't worship Elon Musk or some other billionaire now for whatever reason, there's no reason to worship an ancient billionaire. I mean, it doesn't make to me any more sense at all.
Nah, he's gonna be made into a god to some people. I mean, shit. I mean, it just depends on what you consider God. That's why the golden calf was created. Some people can interpret that as people worshiping gold, or it could have been just they had something that they want to build I don't know. There could have been millions of reasons why they did something like that, but the idea for me is that people do things like, you asked the question, why would they build the pyramids? That's a great question. Why would they build the pyramids? I mean, I've read so many theories, ideas. I mean, everybody thinks they have the answer. um I could say personally, from just my information that I've learned, there's many reasons why they could have had built that pyramid. One person could have said, hey, I want to build the pyramid for this, but didn't have enough funds for that, so they went to another person and said, hey, as long as we can use it as this, I'm in, I'll put in on it. And then they found the third person and said, well, y'all doing this, that. Well, shoot, I want to do this right here. I want to do this right here. So, if y'all let me have it for this, then, I put in on trying to create it. And it just went into like investors. That could have been the very first big investment. You know what I mean? How can we get people to take time out of their day to create something like this? I mean, they say that it was built. One of the craziest things is you mentioned Plato, and I think you mentioned Herodotus too. Herodotus, I think that's who you said too. But I know in Herodotus' books, when you read his books, he tells you how long they said they built the pyramids and what they used to build the pyramids. Now, whether I believe that they had pulleys and ropes and all this other stuff back then to do that, I can't say what to believe. I can't tell you what I would believe because I don't know their level of intelligence and what they did over there. I mean, can I survive how they were living back then? If we was just flip-flopping positions in a heartbeat, probably not. And they probably would be culturally shocked living in the conditions that I live in right now. But my point is that Herodotus actually says that they use pulleys and that they used a ramp. And then the ramp actually took 10 years. And then to build the pyramids itself, it took 20 years. And so 30 years total. And I've read people say that it would take, like a certain amount of minute, like a minute or less than a minute to put every block down if they worked every single day and blah, 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 blah for that amount of time and so on and so forth. But that's just coming, when he wrote that stuff in his books or when he sharing that during that time frame, that was information that he got from people from that time. He's basically the father of history. That's what they call him, the father of history. He was the first historian, I guess you could say. And people don't understand that, you might not believe it, but now it's time for you to disprove it. You know what I mean? Like when they say, well, a lot of time it comes down to artifacts. They say, well, we don't have artifacts to show that they had that. Well, back then people were robbing things like that all the time. There's a lot more stuff in private collection than there is out there, in the general public in museums that they say. They say the black market for artifacts is crazy out there. But my point is that a lot of
people that make artifacts that aren't real, so that they falsify, and that's happened from the beginning.
Yeah. But my point is that what level of evidence does somebody need to know why they did it? Like, let me ask you, why do you think they built the pyramids?
Mythology.
Just mythology. Like, what do
mythology? Because just like say, why did people build cathedrals? Mythology. It's what.
Well, what do you mean by mythology?
Like I told you, if you go to ancient Egyptian creation myths, I sent you the link. That every one of them start with a mound, and if you look at the mastabas, the mound of creation started there, and then the pyramid relates to the mound of creation. This is not me guessing. This is stated, with their thinking, the mythology, and that the Bin stone on top of the pyramid also relates to mythology. So it's not even a guess. I say this all the time. I've never had anybody be able to debunk that I say this. Go look it up. Go look up Mound of Creation. Go look up ancient Wikipedia, ancient creation myths from the Egyptians, and read through it. It's all there. You can go to, like I said, you can also do just creation myths in general. And there's only like 5 main creation myths all over the world. So, and they're just different. Go ahead.
No, the reason why I asked that is because when I look up the word myth, I hear that it's basically just a traditional oral story, and then sometimes some people will say fictional story and stuff like that. So when you say it, you're saying it as that. If I'm understanding it correctly, it's like almost like the first movie theater, like you've told us stories there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So, like I said, you could look up the ancient Egyptian creation myths. And what I mean by that is that's their religious stories of how everything started. Just like in Genesis, the Bible, it starts that, there was nothingness. And then, God makes, the water and but it's like the third day or something when the sun is created. So they're telling you these stuff. It's a myth. I mean, everything The Earth is not as old as the whole universe, and the sun is a lot older than the Earth. So, I
No, it's
mean,
just I like clarification to understand what other people are saying, because everybody has their own way of putting things into words, and you have for clarification's sake. That's why I asked that. I don't know why the pyramids were built. I can't you know determine that, and I can
but
go off the ideas.
go read what I sent you. It just
Yeah,
so start at the first one, right? It's like, let's just assume that the creation myths. Let's assume that you don't know, right? If you go to the first thing, it says Egyptian creation myths are the ancient Egyptian accounts of the creation of the world. Pyramid texts, tomb walls, decorating writings going back 2,700 to 2,200 BCE, the Old Kingdom, provide majority of the information regarding the Egyptian creation myths. And so then there's where it says common elements, right? If you click on that, it says common elements, right? So this is going to tell you the synopsis in a sense. The different myths have some common elements. They all are held that the world had arisen out of lifeless water chaos. And like I told you before, to me, the water chaos really is not water the way we think of it, like it's in the ocean. Water is the whole, to them, universe. But so it says, called new. And it says they included a pyramid-shaped mound called the Bin Bin. So all the creation myths, which is not just one, the common element is they all do this. They all have this pyramid-shaped mound. So like I said, why are they doing that? Here is telling you why, the motivation, which is the first thing to emerge from the waters. These elements were likely inspired by the flood. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that maybe they curtailed their personal myths, because all of Eurasia and the Americas also has flood, water myths, primordial waters. But the difference is they have anywhere from a duck or a swan or some other animal digging, land from the bottom of the ocean or river or lake or whatever, and bringing up the primordial mound. So it's not that only Egypt has it and no one else does. They all have it. Just different myths explain the similar story. So anyways, so I'm just saying I don't agree with that they may have curtailed theirs to specifically their area, like I believe all areas do. But that doesn't mean that that's the only reason they have it. It says the Egyptians may have equated the emergence of life from a primordial chaos. It says the imagery of the primordial mound derives from the highest mounds of earth emerged as the river receded. That is a guess, a speculation. That's not a fact. They don't say that that's exactly the fact. And like I said, anyways, it's a cosmic ocean, not the River Nile specific, as they're referencing. It says, and then it says, the sun was also closely associated with creation, and it is said to be the first risen from the mound. So back to the mound again is more important. And so then there's different ways, of course, the sun comes out. There's different deity explanations. Some is the sun god Ra, or as the god Kerprit. I can't pronounce this stuff right, but anyways, we're represented as the new rising sun. And it says there are many versions of the sun's emergence. And it was said to have emerged directly from the mound or from a lotus flower that grew from the mound. Or like I also showed you, it could have been an egg, which also came on the mound. This is another common element in the cosmologies, is a familiar figure of the cosmic egg. It's sometimes a substitute from the primeval waters and or the primeval mound. So because like the egg's round, or sometimes the egg floats in water, and so it's doing what the mound is, except it's not land. It's which also relates to like the turtle's back, where it's not touching you. Someone asked me before, well, do you think it's correct that it's turtles all the way down? no one ever thought that. That was something that later people came up with. That's not part of any creation story. The turtle is floating like the egg would be floating. And sometimes even like in Japan, they have, in a sense, a mound, but it floats not, it's not, set to the ground anywhere. So what it's floating in, of course, is just space to them. So the cosmic waters is not real waters. It also, to me, the ones that do stuff like that are trying to explain why, like earthquakes, because the ground's not stable, because it's floating, it's wobbling or whatever. But so, like it says here, the one variant, the cosmic egg version, hatches the sun god as primeval power emerged from the primeval mound, which stood as chaos in the primeval sea. Like I said, this is not the only thing that does this. Because if you go to creation myths, right, the next link that I have, creation myths, I sent you. So if you go down to where it says definitions, if you look over in the definition corner on the right side, it shows structure of the world according to Finnish mythology. And if you look at what the picture is showing in that thing, it shows
right here, this one,
all mound, right, with light shooting out from it. So to me, go to the that's that one. Go to the one for the next link, which was creation myths. That way people can see what I'm talking about. It's just the second link. Because that way people can see, because I know that it's better to understand, not because I just talk, but because you actually
I got you. I just had to close that one out and open up
no problem.
one. That's the only thing I don't really like about it. You got to close the one to open up another.
Right, creation myths. And if you go to the part where it says right there, descriptions, see that structure, that picture, go back up.
This one right here?
Yeah, see that picture in the right-hand side? That's the Finnish mythology, and it's a mound, and then that's the sun or the axis mundi shooting out from under it, meaning it's the center of the world. That's no different than the Babylonians. In a sense, it also relates to how they built the mounds in the Americas. They believed it was along the axis mundi. So I'm trying to show you that we see them as separate. And I'm saying that even though these cultures are somewhat separate, their ideas of mythology is not as separate as we think. And once you start understanding that these are connected in the way they're connected, then it's a lot easier to grasp of what I'm talking about. So then go to the next thing. Right? So the next thing I sent you was the AI overview of the Eridu Genesis. And it's the oldest Sumerian account of creation and a flood. But it starts in water, in a sense, identifying Eridu as the first created city upon a mound of earth rising from the primeval waters. According to the known Sumerian creation myths and Sumerian flood, it tells how the gods created humans, established kingship, and in the sense decided to destroy them later in the flood. So, but also the next thing I sent you was Slavic mythology. And you can click on that because that goes to Britannica, just so we can, keep everything going. So the Slavic mythology, right? So what that is talking about is the earth diver myth. And it said a myth known from the Slavs tells a god ordered a handful of sand to be brought up from the bottom of the sea and created land from it. Usually it's the devil who brings up the sand. It's only one case. And anyways, out of the case of God himself, the earth diver myth is diffused throughout practically all of Eurasia. That would be Europe and Asia. And is found in India as well. Right. Because all this stuff is, in a sense, related to the similar things. This is not, like I was saying, this is not a guess. The evidence, if you understand, is literally pointing to this kind of stuff. So to me, when like I said, when people ask why do I think this, this is why I think this. And then
Yeah.
the next link you can go to, it talks about earth diver myths, talks about genetics and myths. So you can click on that one. And that one talks about how they think that Siberia is where these myths transmitted from. And they talked about the earth diver is one of the most widely distributed myths. And the earth diver myth is in a sense kind of like the Egyptian, only the difference is the Egyptian is just that land comes up by itself. Maybe some power decides or allows it, but the earth diver is generally an animal does it. That's in a sense a different, but like I said, in the scheme of that, it's a mound that comes up out of the water. It's not really different. And so,
Yeah, you mentioned turtle right here.
right, because I'm trying to show you in turtle. So, in other words, the turtle mythology, the egg mythology, the mound, the pyramids, the dolmens, all this stuff is action and related mythologically. And see what there says 24,000? Yeah. It's old. It wasn't invented. That's also, and I'm not, once again, this is
Well, see, that's
not.
why I always ask people what do they consider a civilization? Because like obviously they had some kind of artistic views back then. You know what
Well,
I
they
mean?
did
And
definitely.
obviously they talked to each other. I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody seen that and they was like, "Man, I'll give you this for that." And somebody was like, "Okay, here you can have it. I have plenty of them." That's the first trade. Was it
Yeah.
the first government bureaucracy type stuff? No. It was an easy one person to another. Hey man, I got some corn over here. I give you some corn for that. That's the first
Right.
trade. You know what I'm
And so if
saying?
you go down a little bit more, it shows you a map of the ideas, the Earth diver, how it goes from Siberia and Eurasia over and India over also into North America. So it's showing that these myths are not landlocked in one area. They're literally spreading out.
No,
So to
yeah.
me, like I said, why do I think this? I don't think this just because I have some odd idea. I think this because of DNA. I think this because of understanding the mythology and the movements and of what these people are doing. So I'll go to the next thing. So the next thing is the world turtle, and the world turtle, like we've already addressed, is in a sense the mound of creation is on top of the turtle. That's the difference. And it's in Chinese, the Americas, it's in Hinduism, and sometimes it involves other stuff, but it's literally another type of explanation of the mound of creation in a sense. In
Oh, that's you got the Turtle Island for the Americas.
right, exactly. So I'm just trying to show you that these myths help explain why people would make a mound in the Americas or make a mound, in Egypt or a pyramid or whatever, because it's similar types of mythology of their creation stories. So just like I said, how Catholics build, wherever they
Cathedrals.
go, they build, their temples or whatever, their cathedrals. This is a similar type of thing. It also is because, remember, it's like 90% of people in Siberia and 90% of people in the Americas have some version of reincarnation, which I also think, in the sense, the Egyptians, they're creating like a reincarnation machine by making the mound, going back to the mound itself of creation. And they're putting the person inside it, like, in a sense, recreating the first creation.
Yeah.
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 So then the next thing right here, I have the Axis Mundi. And the Axis Mundi relates to all this stuff. The Axis Mundi is the center of the world. And if you read it, it's where it says comparative mythology. It says in 20th century comparative mythology, the Axis Mundi is called the cosmic axis, the world pillar, the center of the world, or the world tree. It also relates to the Milky Way, which I think starts in Africa. And the mythology I'm talking about, not the Milky Way itself, but so and then generally it also is a representation of the connection between heaven and earth.
Yeah. Yeah, right here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that what's so funny is that the I Ching is exactly like that too. It's like
Right.
a connection between the heaven and earth. And what I like about the I Ching so much is that, and I always talk about this. This is one of my great examples that I always talk about. The I Ching goes off of pictures, and it's off of everybody else's interpretation. I mean, one person
Right.
might have that can give you, what the signs might mean and what they're supposed to portray, but your interpretation will definitely be different. That's one thing that I did learn about reading the I Ching. That's why I like it so much, is because it's no two people are going to get the same understanding of that symbol. They'll get a basic idea, like they can have a conversation about it, but they'll it would hit them differently. It would mean something
Well,
different to
and
them.
I think that that's the point you have to grasp is this is a mythology idea of this sort of similar stuff. It doesn't really matter how you exactly explain it. You're still explaining the same sort of origin belief. Whether it's a tree, a mountain, a mound, a pyramid, and all this stuff it could be smoke, fire. I mean, it's a staircase, a ladder, a tower. I mean, it's because our limitation is it has to be one thing. But like you said, it's really a loose interpretation. Like there's not a real mountain, it's not a real island. There's not a, what I'm saying? It's a mythological understanding.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's why
like I
symbols
said,
are important.
yeah,
That's
oh,
why I study
definitely.
signs and symbology, because if you understand what that sign and symbol meant in the original form, you will be able to understand it even in 2026. You just
Right.
have to really, yeah. And I study signs and symbols like crazy. That's one of my favorite things, especially Freemasonry and the stuff like that, and the cults and stuff like that, following everybody's symbols. It means something. It means the same thing everywhere. You just got to understand what the symbols are, and that's why I like it a lot. It's hard,
Right.
but
And,
it's fun. And it's
and
good.
so all the land is coming out of the cosmic ocean or the primeval waters or the celestial rivers. This is all talking about the cosmos, right? It's not talking, that's why I'm saying, like people go, well, Egypt, had that belief because of the Nile. I'm like, this was cosmic water. This is not like, they'll say the flood myths to me relate to cosmic waters more than an actual area of flooding. And I feel like that if you really understand the mythologies being explained, that they relate to creation myths more than they relate to an event. So even like where sometimes people with Atlantis try to say, oh, there's flood myths that might relate to this. I think this is still taking from older ideas in a sense. They were already there. Everybody had these myths of this island or, whatever, and that the island eventually floods.
Yeah,
So,
and then that's where people get that idea from Atlantis from, is that there was a flood, that earthquake of some sort swallowed up the land, and they lost the advanced technology. I know you and Enigma was going in on the last one, because Enigma, he's probably listening now. He'll probably jump in here. He really believes that Atlantis was in Egypt. Like he follows it to the T. Like he says, this is exactly what Plato says, and this is the only place that it could be. But Plato doesn't say exactly where Atlantis is at. That's why there's so many different ideas. He gives descriptions that everybody can pick and choose to use for their evidence and their argument to say it's here or there, but that doesn't mean that's where it's at. Like I've heard the Azores, I heard the Richak structure, I've heard near Cadiz area, I've heard, and all of them have enough evidence for them to say this is the area that they believe. The only one that I'm not really sold on is the Azores. I just don't. I believe the. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about
well,
that.
like I told you, if you read the thing, it says out past the Pillars of Hercules, which, like I said, have to do with North Africa and Spain. So it's just past that, which is outside of the Mediterranean. But it really doesn't matter. The whole story is an allegory. It's meant to just say that look at these people that stopped worshiping the gods correctly and thus got destroyed. You need to worship the gods correctly and be, a good society in a sense. But
Yeah,
I'm trying to show that the mythology, even that could give rise to beliefs of a island or primordial mound. Because remember, if you read it, it says that Atlantis had a mountain on it. Well, that would be like this. It's showing that it's the first land, and it's also a mountain, and it's also probably the center of the world. So it's
yeah.
there. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you. And it's just I understand how, because I've had some discussions with Enigma, and the reason why I say that is because because you talked about the pyramids in Egypt. He believes that's the technology that the Atlanteans had, was to be able to create megalithic structures such as the pyramids. And that's why I say, like, when you say that, is it mythology? That's what mythology tells him when he hears a story, when he reads the books.
Yeah, but like I said, we know that the ideas of, I'll send you a picture, that the ideas of how we get to the pyramids is a evolution process, and it's heavily influenced from Mesopotamia. So you would have to then, if you were going to say that, have to say that technology in some way or another has to come from the Sumerians or Mesopotamia, not from Egypt itself. But I think that's wrong. I think that they got some of their ideas, but they're here, I sent you the thing. This is my art of actual structures and the evolution of both how Mesopotamia and Egypt. If you go to the picture I sent you.
Hold on. When you was talking, I was looking. Wait, what? You just sent it now, right?
Yeah, I did.
I didn't see it. Where did you send it to?
I sent it to in the present, whatever this.
Oh, I'm looking on the other screen. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
My bad. No, I'm looking on the other screen. There we go.
There you go. Evolution of the ziggurats and evolution of the pyramids. And it shows that they both start in something raised platform, and then how they evolved eventually to what they, evolved to. And so I'm just saying is that the first stuff certainly was influenced by the Sumerians, right? Mm-hmm. But the Egyptians stacking them up and making that mound, that's their own thing, which later you start to see happen in Mesopotamia, I think influenced from Egypt, like, going the other way. I have a picture on that also, the evolution of the mounds. Because I don't think it was all, just like cultures in general, I don't think it was all one way. And I'm not 100% sure about which did what, but I just sent it to you. You can look at it after you read it down with that.
Yeah, I got it. There we go. I had to switch screens because I have multiple screens on it, and I got to switch them.
Right. So Mesopotamia doesn't have, in a sense, a mound as much as it believes in a mountain. It's the first sort of, but it's a mountain, hill, whatever. It's a similar thing. And then the mound of creation for Egypt. And then Mesopotamia has the dual mountain. And then Egypt has a dual mountain. And then in between on both of them, both Mesopotamia and Egypt, that's where the sun comes out of that thing. Then I think Egypt makes the step pyramid. And then you see it copied with the Babylonians. The only difference is they stick a temple on top. So they have, it's not a grave, but it is a step structure like a pyramid. And then on top is a temple, where the Egyptian is a grave. And then the Mesopotamians, influence, I think, possibly that thing on top, the bin being put on top of the pyramids, maybe as the mound of creation ends up on top of the pyramid, where before the structure itself was the mound of creation in a sense. So it changes. So I mean, if he, like I said at the beginning, though, if you're going to say the Atlantean, which I don't agree, you would have to say it had something to do with the Mesopotamians.
Yeah, because Göbekli Tepe goes farther than that. It's,
Right,
I
but here
know
I'll show you a thing. This is Babylonians and the Mayans. The Mayans believe in the center of the world's a pyramid too. Click on that. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. They do too. The mound of creation for the Babylonians is a step pyramid, and so is it for the Mayans. And then the Egyptian primordial hill symbol is a step pyramid.
So you think the information came from Egypt, went to Sumerian, and then also it went from Egypt to the Americas because they can.
Well, no, I think kind of. I think not exactly that, but I think that yes, some of the ideas did go over to the Americas, because the thing people need to grasp is the Americas were not closed. Ideas kept coming in, and ideas 5,000 years ago come in and then go all the way down to Peru, the first pyramid in Peru. So here I'll show a picture of the this is the different migrations in a sense. And one of the migrations for sure had to do with the people in so the pink one, right? See where the pink ends up in Lake Baikal, that pink arrow coming out of the Middle East. So, right. So we know eDNA, as I already said, goes to the Balkans from Egypt 5,000 years ago.
Right.
So that because you asked the question, like, how did the ideas? So the ideas to me go from Egypt, so like you just said, and it goes to the Mesopotamia, and that why the Babylonians and Akkadian stuff looks like that. But it didn't just stop there. It actually went. Here, I have a file of eDNA. Let me find it because this helps understand. So it's migrations of people.
You sending another one?
There you go. I got it. Yeah. So in other words, it's not that the Egyptians themselves went all the way over there, but if you notice where it says, and I know it's kind of hard because there's too many lines, but the darker purple that leaves the area below Egypt goes into the Balkans, and it says 5 KYA. That means 5,000 years ago. It also went earlier. That's the little bit brighter purple, and it's 10,000 years ago, but it goes more to like almost Iran or to northern Mesopotamia. But I don't care about that one. I'm talking about going back to, you asked about the pyramid stuff going to the Americas. So the pyramids, to me, the ideas of these step type of pyramids, they go up into the Balkans. And those people from the Balkans, we know, go over to Siberia.
Yep.
So I'll show you a thing for that. Where is it? So what I'm saying is it changed DNA, it changed cultures more than one time before it gets there. So it's definitely not like just one people went. Egyptians never went there. Even eDNA didn't go there. That's not how it happened. It did get ideas get there, but it didn't get there like in a simple process in one culture, one DNA. No, it's more like leapfrogging, a whole bunch of different stuff happening. That's a better way to understand it. But it did happen, and it definitely. It helps understand like why some of the things in the beliefs and stuff are similar, but not in a. I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, so it, the haplogroups, what you're showing, like E1B1B,
Right.
that's one of my favorite ones because that's
Right.
the last haplogroup. Uh, how can I say it? One of the last haplogroups to leave. Well, no, is it the last or the first haplogroup? Which one
It's
is it? I
not the
can't.
first. In
Okay.
fact, stuff left and then
Okay, yeah,
comes
it was the
back
last
and leaves
haplo. Yeah, it
again.
was the last haplogroup to leave Africa that they can find a major DNA on. That's like the biggest one that they can find, like a massive amount of. That's what it was, and it's interesting because they find it going just like you showing to Mesopotamia. You know what
Yes,
I
it
mean? And
definitely.
even
And I think when it did, it brought empire.
yeah,
And I think it
well,
also brought pyramid ideas that it's a pyramid, no more mountain. Now it's a pyramid at the center of the world. And that's why Babylonian and stuff has a pyramid, where before it wasn't a pyramid. So I think it was influenced by Egypt.
yeah.
So that, and then like I
I mean,
said,
they
they
have the
built,
same DNA. I actually did an article on this on my website. So I wanted to find out. Let me see if I can bring it up too. So I let me see. I can't remember which one it was, but I did an article asking where did the Sumerians come from, and the reason why was because everybody's like, where did the Sumerians come from? Where did the Sumerians come from? Blah 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 blah. Hold on, let me take a drink real quick. But everybody's saying, where did the Sumerians come from? Where did they? How do we figure out where they came from? Blah 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 blah. And you always get an idea that they might have came from east, like India, Maya, possibly, or
well, the
somewhere.
reason India is actually India's ideas come from the Middle East because of L male DNA. That's why India's stuff, and then later our DNA comes from the steppe. But those people from the steppe had already got ideas from Egypt, so that it
Yeah.
wasn't like it's a lot more
Uh,
related.
no, you're right. It is a lot more related. Like I said, like here we go. Here, I'll bring it up real quick. I don't remember which article it was that I did.
Oh, I'm gonna have to just look up proto-Neoprene. I can't find it for some. I hate sometimes when I'm like looking
uh,
for stuff and my mind's going too fast.
So here's my website, rebirthoftheword.com. So part one was the hidden history of the Sumerians haplogroups, part one. So I did an article. This was back in 2022, October 25th. And then I did one, the hidden history of the Sumerians, the color code, part two. So we'll just I think it's under this one. And basically, I talked about how I took a class from Dr. Nili Samet from Bar Ilan University, and I took a class from there. I took the notes down and everything. And she actually said that the Sumerian civilization started around 3200 BC. So I've read so many different dates. I also read a peer-reviewed article on JSTOR, which I love this source also myself. It says those who would argue for the Sumerians being the first people in southern Mesopotamia cannot turn to linguistic evidence for help. One very obvious point that a philologist advances that names of Sumer's most important cities, Urkish, Uruk, Eridu, and Shuruppak, are non-Sumerian as are the Sumerian words for Tigris and Euphrates. So of course that made me question. Okay, you can't figure out where the Sumerians came from by linguistics, so that's off the table right there, right? So I need to just take that off the table. And then I read another peer-reviewed article. Well, it's not a peer-reviewed article. I'm sorry. This is I read some Samuel Noah Kramer's book, the history, culture, and character. And this is actually available online through this website right here, which you can just click on to from my website. And he says that it was found to be part in a prehistoric mound containing evidence of the earliest immigrants into the land. These people who have come to be known as Ubadians. So the
Right? Yeah, you
Ubadians,
were first.
yeah.
That's true.
So that's what I'm saying is that Samuel Noah Kramer even acknowledges that in his book. Um, so I went to genetics. I actually had a podcast discussion with a geneticist, so I'm very familiar with genetics. But genetics is basically the scientific study of genes and heredity. So of course that's easy to explain. So I talked about how I went and did my haplogroups and I found out how haplogroups works and stuff like that. I did my own DNA test. And then what I found was the oldest extant human maternal lineages include mitochondrial haplogroups L0D and L0K found in Southern Africa, click-speaking forager peoples, broadly classified as cohesion. Profiling these early mitochondrial lineages allows for a better understanding of modern human evolution. This is the peer-reviewed article that I attached right here. I highlighted where I talked about it. Then I talked about haplogroup L3 has been linked with out of Africa migration of modern humans, which goes back possibly 50 to 70,000 years ago. The migration originated in East Africa and extended to West Asia and then to the rest of the world. I took a screenshot of that article and put the link right there so people can read it for themselves. And I included all that. And then I got some more DNA peer-reviewed articles where it's carriers of mitochondrial DNA macro haplogroup L3 basal lineages migrated back to Africa from Asia from around 70,000 years ago. That's when we were just talking about when people come back into Africa, right? We've already talked about that. So yeah, I have peer-reviewed articles that talk about that. So one thing that I found out was the one way to figure out where the Sumerian people came from was, since I've been to Iraq, I know what the Iraqi people look like. I know that if I was to cut my hair off,
but you mean what they look like now because they didn't.
That's exactly. Yeah, so that's where I'm getting at. So when I Google the type of haplogroups the Iraqi peoples have, I tend to find J along with R1b and E1b1b, right?
Right, and J comes from the Cossack Mountains. That's where J comes from.
Yep. And so, and this is what, and I even wrote right here, why did I Google the Iraqi people's haplogroups? Because when I write an article, I try to answer people's questions that I know they're going to ask. Why in the hell would you do that in the first place? Well, it's because Sumer is located in the southernmost part of Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq. So what I wanted to do was, okay, since there are indigenous people still living in those locations,
but those people are not indigenous like as in 60,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Are indigenous more like 5,000, 7,000 years ago. So it's much younger. I want to show you about how I'm saying Egypt gets there. So to go into what you said about haplogroup E, right? So the first thing that I sent you is how I showed you E goes up to the Balkans and stuff. And those people take it 5,000 years ago over to Siberia. So the idea is leave 5,000, and in 5,000, they're already in Siberia. And then 5,000, they're already in the Americas. So they go in very quickly. It's not like they did a long standstill, but it wasn't the same DNA doing this movements. But it is the same ideas. And then people don't understand that. Then what happened is, right, so the first one I see, you showed the first one, right? The one before that? Yeah, that one. See, so I showed you E. E leaves and goes to the Balkans. And then these people in the Balkans go to Ukraine, and Ukraine takes it all the way to Siberia. And then the next picture, that's the one you're doing, right? So the Arabs were
this
from
one or India. This one right here.
Yeah. So no, the one before that. There you go. So Siberia, then this shows 5,000 whatever years ago. Siberia goes over to the Americas and ends up in the Pacific Northwest, the Tlingit, and then the Tlingit go down all the way to California. Okay, and then the next picture shows California going all the way down to Peru. 5,000 years ago. So it's 5,000 years ago. eDNA goes to the people to Ukraine or the steppe. The people in the steppe take it all the way to Siberia. People from Siberia take it to the Americas. People in the Americas then go from Pacific Northwest down to California, and then California takes it down to Peru. Go down to the next one.
Let's see this one right here.
Right. That is evidence that 5,000 years ago, there was a migration from California down to Peru. right in the area where the first pyramids 5,000 years ago were built in Peru. The oldest,
Yeah.
which I have a picture of that too, the oldest stuff, the building pyramids in the Americas.
Well, actually,
So,
a lot of people consider the ones in Peru older than the ones in Egypt.
but I'm
There's
saying the
some people.
ideas, these, well, because remember, the idea starts abound to creation, and all this stuff is related. See, here's the stuff in Peru. They don't look like step pyramids exactly, but they are sort of pyramid-like structures. 5,000 years old. I'm just saying that the ideas moved all the way over.
Yeah.
They moved over again. This is not the only time this ever happened. People kept coming in. I'm just making a comment that when people say, "Oh, well, this also because that's the deity of the sun," and they also have obelisks, and they have a lot of things that are kind of similar. They also have, in a sense, almost like their own writing with those little knots that they tie, which go back about that time, pretty old too. So my point is, though, is just to show that when people say that there's no way that it could go over there, I'm showing you a way that the ideas went over there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not saying that they sent exact building technology, but they sent the mythology and then the desire to do this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Let me. It's crazy because when I was telling you earlier about the the E1B1B, I remember I wrote when I wrote because I always write articles about what I do. So like what I like to do is I like to write articles on my website, just sharing basic stuff where where I learned stuff at. You know what I'm saying? Just
Right.
it's like a hobby of mine. It's just like a journal, I guess you could say.
Right.
And so I wrote. So this one was back in 2022. So yeah, haplogroup E1B1B, formerly known as E3B, represents the last major direct migration from Africa into Europe. It is believed to have first appeared in the Horn of Africa approximately 26,000 years ago and dispersed to North Africa and the Near East during the late Paleolithic and Mesolithic periods. This is what is according to Wikipedia. And then I also come down here, and like I said, the reason why I wanted to figure out where the Sumerians came from was because everybody always talked about them. Oh shoot, let me see. Yeah, here we go. So right here it said this is a peer-reviewed article that I had right here. Also, that it says the migration models demonstrated that the gene flow to Iraq from East Africa with the Levantine corridor, the most probable passageway out of Africa. The data presented here will enrich our understanding of genetic diversity in the region and introduce a Powerplex Y23 database to the forensic community. And the reason why I wanted to know where the Sumerians came from is because everybody always talked about well, nobody knows where they migrated from, nobody knows where they came from, and this, that, and the third. And I just feel like the easiest way, that the closest way we can get to any answer for them, and I really only believe it's the only one closest to it unless we go back in time, it's just like you said, even though the people that's there now are not the indigenous people 20, 30, 60,000 years ago, they're there, they're the indigenous people of there today. And I always say this, and I know I kind of make some people upset when I say this: the indigenous people of today a lot of times are not the same indigenous people that were thousands of years ago. That's,
True.
they may carry the same
That's
DNA.
accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
So 10,000. I sent you an article, or not an article. I sent you a picture of Neville Corey. Neville Corey has probably 50% rDNA, I think it is, and 50% eDNA. So it's 10,000 years ago or so that eDNA we know goes up into that area. African Bantu are Indian. No, well, the idea is somewhat in India, but not at an old time. They started moving around because, see, cattle from India goes into Africa and there's trade like back and forth. So it's not that, and that's not also everybody in a sense that has to do with it. But anyway, so I was talking about E. So these people are E. So E is involved, and this is the proto thing like Göbekli Tepe. E is definitely involved in the stuff at Neville Corey, and Neville Corey, Navala Corey, whatever it is. They definitely were involved in the later stages of Göbekli Tepe before it was abandoned. Probably because I feel that they also were having more sites like this built, so they could do their religion in their own area more than just have to go to more of a central feasting area. But it is interesting, the haplogroups and how they change. And the people, like I said, there is Q DNA, not a large portion, but there is in the Marsh Arabs, and the Marsh Arabs are the genetics for the Sumerians. And a lot of it has to do with probably J1 DNA, which also goes into Africa 10,000 years ago. The thing is that, once again, just like I said before about the mythology, it's not like it's wrong to think that one person told everybody everything, or myths just went one way. It never fucking happened like that. Here's a picture of JDNA to show you how it moved around. So, I mean, like you said, sharing. People share. People always share. That's not even something that is new.
Took something from somewhere else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And they blend it together. They make new stuff, and they blend it together, and
they created another whole culture. That's why we got so many different cultures now. That's the beauty of being human, is that we have the
right, exactly.
That we have.
Right, yeah. And I'm not anti-culture. I am an atheist. I don't believe, in cultural myths as real, but I do think that, I obviously studied them. I do think that cultural myths are interesting. Like, there's some atheists that are really hostile towards. I'm an anti-religionist in the fact that I don't believe it's real, and I reject anything that says it is real. But I'm not.
So, but if Jesus did come down and talk to you, you'll change your mind, though, right? Like, if something came out, like,
well,
I don't know that
it depends on what you mean by Jesus. Because if you're saying that Elon Musk is real and he says he's going to run my life, I wouldn't support that, or a celestial North Korea. If you said I have to live, under domination, and I wouldn't. Just the fact that something is real. Now, that I agree. If you could show me that a God was real, I'd believe in a God. But worship, following, and belief are not the same thing. I can believe something is real, but hate it or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So, but do you think there's an all creation of something like an atom? Like, do you consider? Because some atheists consider atoms. They don't worship an atom, of course, and they don't have a religion that surrounds an atom. But could that be considered a godlike thing?
Well, I think the godlike thing is our own limited grasp of large concepts. To me, when people say like, "Oh, the whole universe is connected," that's a feeling we have because we don't like to feel alone in the world. But we can. Like, we're talking together. You can make connection with people, but it doesn't need to be that we have a spiritual connection. We have a connection because we're humans. We're emotional beings. We have connections with animals. People make connections with their car, their rock. That doesn't make them magical. It's that we like connections, and it makes us feel better, because when we feel alone or whatever, we have, psychological problems. I mean, it's like, how they solve, PTSD is not remove, put you in a bubble wrap and remove you from the world. It's in a sense to make you not feel alone and make you feel, that you have stuff. That's like to me, like counseling, talk therapy, in a sense, talking to another human being and feeling heard, is helpful. And yet they haven't done anything different to your brain. Your life situations probably don't change. Do you know what I'm saying? But yet you can
Yeah,
handle it better. I mean,
yeah,
we're amazing creatures to me in the fact that, and it's not us. I mean, I think that if we look at other apes and how much they interact in a positive way, they make war, they make, friends, just like we do. We're not like special.
yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, well, we almost at the 2 hour mark. That was a good presentation, man. Like I said, man, it's good to learn from other people. I don't ever knock anybody's understanding of what they've done through their research. It's just, I mean,
Right.
you obviously put time into this. This is your artwork. This is your stuff. You've put time
Yeah.
into it. So of course, putting it out there and sharing it online, you're exposing yourself to, criticism and all kinds of stuff. And I'm sure that you wouldn't mind going back and forth with somebody as long as it's respectful and you stay on topic. I mean, that's how it
True.
should be, right? And
True.
like you said before, just like in the last time we spoke, you said that you're always up for, um, you know, you know, open ideas and stuff like that. You just have your own you have your own journey just like everybody else do. And I think that's what's respectful about it, is that not everybody's going to agree on everything. I mean, like I said it plenty of
Yeah.
times, you can have two PhD representatives in the same room that went to the same class, took the same teacher at the same school, and they'll still come up with two different theories. And that's why there's a lot of arguments about what gravity is, even until to this day, right? We have arguments and debates about what gravity is. And I know for a fact if I take this little AirPods right here and I let it go, I know for a fact it's going to fall on the ground. I need no more explanation than that. That if that's what we're calling gravity, then I know anything that's heavier than this air that I'm breathing right now is going to fall to the ground. So that's it. I don't need no more. I don't need an apple to hit me on top of my head to realize that. I've known that from since the first day I took my first steps. I
Right.
got up and I fell right back down. That's gravity. What I mean? I didn't float in the air. So, but there's PhD representatives out there that still argue that. And there's also people out there who have PhDs in history and theology and all these other types of mythologies and history ideas and stuff like that. They have their own ideas and theories. I think what we need to do more as a group of people is that if you have the time, if you do have the time, two ways to support information being passed is by one, letting people talk and share their ideas based off their due diligence. And then also those people have to be respectful enough to the people to say, okay, hey, look, I didn't know that. Let me change this. I learn something new every day. I have a discussion with somebody, whether I learn, okay, this is okay. Now I know why this person believed this because they found this piece of evidence. I've always said this before that um, evidence is good, but it also can be bad. Just like metallurgy and everything else that we came to have, technology and everything else. And I say that because right now there are people who are in prison right now because evidence said that they were guilty at that moment. Then later on, in some cases 20, 30 years later, new evidence came out to prove that they weren't guilty. So the evidence is only needed to persuade people of whatever idea they want to believe in. That's okay. Evidence doesn't mean that it's facts, and it doesn't mean that it's fiction. It just means that it has a strong argument versus one that the other person didn't have. And that's where I think we have to be careful with, is because just somebody translated something and said, "Hey, look, this is what it says." We still have to do on ourselves our own due diligence to be able to figure out if this person was accurate. And then that comes in with patterns too. I was talking about IQs earlier. And if you look at human history, patterns played a major part in our creation. It doesn't always have to be just a coincidence. It doesn't always have to be something that somebody passed because they was given information from somewhere else. It could just be, a pattern in life. It's obvious that this next step is going to happen. It's just when will it happen, and does it all have all the elements to line up to be able to do that? So yeah, I liked how your presentations are, because like I said, you take your time, you create your own artwork. So that means you're thinking about it, and I'm sure this doesn't happen in the first try. It's tweaking here and tweaking there, so you're making sure information is good.
Yeah. Like
So
I
I would
told you,
definitely,
I've been doing it since 2006,
yeah.
trying to figure
So
out.
yeah, and
And
I
so,
hope you
like you
have
said
all
about
this stuff
arguing,
on.
I would have argued with myself now of the ideas that I had 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I started. So I do agree that not only do people argue with other people, most people could argue with themselves what they used to believe.
Yeah, I do that still. I'll be like, man, I can't believe I tell myself, I say this a lot. I say, I can't believe I thought that dumb shit that I thought like 20, 10, 15, 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's why I told you too. I'm willing to be wrong. I think that's a thing that helps knowledge even more than just the seeking of knowledge, is the willing to be wrong, the willing to update to new facts, evidence, thinking, reason. Because when you don't, then you just stay stuck. And like I said, most people, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, man, I'm gonna end the stream, man.
All right, sounds
We're gonna
good.
talk offline for real quick, and then
Okay.
we'll go from there. But hey, we had some people coming here. I appreciate everybody listening. I'm gonna say this before I forget, because I always forget to do this for myself. For one, go visit. You got to give props to everybody that came to listen to us. So of course, a shout out to them. I always forget to promote my book. People keep telling me to promote my book, so I'm gonna promote my book, Journey Through the Origins of History, on Amazon. You got some material out there too that you're putting together, right?
Yeah, I'm working on my book. I thought I had the answers, and I used a lot of other people's sources. And now, as you see, I have a lot of my own ideas from just becoming more of an expert. So I'm working on it. It will be out when it's done. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be on the lookout for that. We're definitely gonna have more conversations about it. But I always say this, and I really appreciate you coming out, and I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream right now. And like I say, always, knowledge is power. Thank you.
Got a little hype now, can I let it die down? I remember days in the trench. Time to go hard in, time to go all in, time to give my all to this shit. Panamera maxed out, first class flights out Atlantic to Pacific, yeah, it's lit.